All right, what's going on, students? Just figured we'd do a little check-in here. For those that have been on the channel before, I'm Chase from Star Tutors. So welcome back if you've been on the channel. If you haven't been on the channel with us before, then welcome for the first time. If you guys want to comment in the live chat, I'll respond to those comments and questions throughout the live stream. But again, whoa, what is going on here? But in any case, guys, again, as we go through this today, I figured it'd be good just to do a little check-in discussion related to the October ACT exams. Even if you didn't take the October test, so this is from yesterday and today, and actually earlier this week, I think that there were a number of students took the test at school as well, so the school day test. So if you guys have any questions about that overall, just let me know, let us know in the comments section if you're watching this after. But again, we're just going to try to answer as many questions as we can and go through some of the things that we've heard from students already, from our students. And then just, again, try to get a little bit of a discussion going here. So if you guys have comments, you guys want to, kind of help each other in the comments section, ask questions in the comments section. I'm sure others can help answer those for us. And I'm sure that we can answer some of those questions as well. So again, if you guys are ready to go, just give me a thumbs up either below the video, or if you want to comment and ask questions, go ahead and give a thumbs up in the chat, or like a, hey, good to go, I'm here. If you have a question, go ahead and do that as well. But we're just going to get started. So from yesterday's tests, I believe that it was F05. So F05 and F06. I think were the two test forms. If I'm wrong about that, then you guys can correct me. But I think it was F05 and F06 were the two test forms that students completed yesterday and then today for the, again, October 2022 ACT exams. If you didn't take that test, that's okay, because a lot of the discussion today, or at least, kind of, I don't know where this is, the discussion or the questions are necessarily going to go. But a lot of the discussion today is going to be just general thoughts. So I think that the majority of students, at least from what we've heard from our students on Saturday's test that took the F05 test, sounded like the math section was particularly difficult. The reading section sounded like it was hard. There was one passage on the reading section that seemed pretty hard. Yeah. So milk there. Yeah, no, I think that you guys are right. I think that, and sorry guys, if there's a lag going on, I'm not seeing the lag, but let me see if. Hopefully that goes away here. I'm not sure what's going on, guys, with the lag, but again, hopefully it's not too bad for right now. Let me just see if I can do anything to help you guys, help it out. Hopefully you guys can still hear me too, if nothing else. But yeah, so F05, guys, that's kind of what we heard. We heard F05, the F05 test form. Yeah, if you took that one yesterday, that was a Saturday test, I believe. It sounded like that one was pretty hard, harder than the September 2022 test for those that took that one as well. So again, guys, as you go through this, if you're feeling like, oh, I came out of this and not doing great, I could have done a lot better. I don't think you're alone in that discussion. I don't think you're alone in thinking that way. But the main point of today's discussion, or where I wanted to go, with this, at least initially, was to help you guys understand the curve, right? For those that haven't taken an ACT, particularly for those that are juniors right now, I just want you guys to realize that if you take a really difficult test form, so I just pulled up 3 previous tests. Okay, so 3 previous test forms. All right, this is the A10 test. So I want you guys to know that if you took the F05 test and you felt like it was really difficult, then the curve is likely going to be in your favor, and that could be just from one section to the next. Okay. Let's see, questions that would appear on number 40 and above we're seeing around number 20 for math. Yeah, so that's kind of the feedback that we've gotten as well. That the math section, so I actually, having heard this from our students and having read a little bit about this test form, I actually pulled up a test that was probably similar, 2 tests that were similar actually, for the math section. I'll just jump into those actually to start. So the B04 test, for those that are familiar with the B04 test form, that's the hardest test that the ACT has ever administered. As you guys go through this, right, and you think about where these difficult questions are, particularly for math, I do want everybody to realize that if it was a hard math form, and it sounds like if you read on the internet or you hear from your friends that, like, yeah, I felt like this test was really hard too, then it probably was pretty difficult, right? I don't think you're going to be alone in making that assessment. So if that's the case, what I want you guys to be thinking about is while you're going through the test, now it can't happen obviously for yesterday, but if you come across another test, if you're a junior and you're planning to take the ACT again, I want you guys to realize that during the test, if you feel like the test is hard, it probably is, right? Especially for those that have practiced a lot. Can everybody give me a thumbs up with that? That you're, if you've taken enough practice tests, right? If you've gone through this enough, it probably is difficult, right? You're probably not alone in making that assessment. And so as we go through this, as you guys look in the background here of the screen, you'll see that the B04 test allowed you to miss essentially 3 additional questions, right? Sorry that you can't see that very well. Let me see if I can change colors here. Maybe do. Yeah, right? You could miss 3 additional questions. Roughly speaking, like a mid-level, just so you guys are aware of this going forward, roughly speaking, 50 out of 60 questions on a standard, like a middle of the road, right? Middle of the road test, 50 out of 60 is kind of like the ACT standard, maybe 49. It's gotten so if you guys have felt this way as well, but the test has gotten harder. They've made it the test harder, but the scale more in your favor over the last 5 years. And that's true. That's a true statement if you guys have taken practice tests. But on the B04 test form, right, this was the hardest test. It wasn't, that's not just me saying this. The scale would indicate that this was the hardest test that ACT has ever administered. This is the B04 test. So if you guys are ever looking to take a very, very difficult test form, or if you've taken a practice test before, the B04 test was the hardest test they've ever given out. And that's based on the scale, right? Here on the science section, usually on the science, on recent tests, you could miss 1 typically, right? And still get a 36. On the B04 test, you could miss 3. The reading section was relatively straightforward. That's kind of the same scale that most of the reading sections have been. But even on the English section as well, that's not the most difficult English section, but still very difficult to get 69 out of 75, right? To get a 34, that's still a difficult English section. Math and science were either the 2 hardest or tied for the hardest ACT tests ever administered. So overall, right? Overall, you know, again, this was the hardest test form they've ever administered. Let me see the comment. Yeah. Okay. Cool. And I use your method. So Ferric, did you were you able to use that same? So Ferric, let me ask you this: if you feel comfortable saying this, but if you guys felt like the test was hard for math, the same ideas that we use for the science section can also be applied to the math section, and that's kind of why, again, reading with the comments and hearing from other students already. That's kind of the feeling that I got was this would be a good video to do because the math tests seemed to be hard. It seemed to kind of universally be hard. As you guys go through this, I want you to realize that if the test feels difficult, and especially for those, right, Ola, I took about 5 practice tests, right? If you felt like this one was difficult, it probably was. And so your goal in that moment, right, is to figure out where the easy questions are. Yeah, right. So very great. And guys, first of all, that is an incredible statement there. So very, if you're a junior or a sophomore, if you're not a senior yet, and you're planning to take this again, that realization, what you just said, and I wish I would. I'm not going to pin the comment, but it is right. Okay, what Sofir just said in the comment section was, yeah, I ego challenged the time-consuming questions, and I got destroyed on the math. If you're still able to take a test, that realization, though, is exactly why taking a test earlier in your junior year can be so helpful. Okay, so if anybody's listening to this, right, like down the line, if you take the October ACT, the beauty of that is you have plenty of opportunities after that to take another test. And again, that idea of moving on from difficult questions, that will stick with you. Sometimes you almost, yeah, thumbs up, guys, if this makes sense. And sometimes you have to fail. Like, you have to have that experience of just like, I got destroyed by this test. Otherwise, it doesn't sink into the level that you want it to. And yet, if there were 5 difficult questions in the first 30, and we go in with the expectation of like, I got to get these questions right because I know I have this goal score in mind, and if I don't get all 30 of the first 30 right, then I'm not going to get that score. That's what's going to throw us off. And again, you can always come back to those questions. So thumbs up, guys, if that all makes sense. Right, if that idea makes sense, that we're trying to get through this, we're trying to think about this maybe in a little bit different way. And the same thing that we talk about with the science section is what we can do for math. But on the math section, it's a lot more difficult, right? Yeah, right? Exactly. So, Ferric, you're exactly right. So, but next time, if you have one more opportunity, guys, to take it, even if you are a senior taking this for the last time, I cannot stress how important it is to make this link between everything we talk about on the math, of the science section, make that link to the math. So for those that haven't seen it before, we have these pretty unique methods that have become pretty popular, I think, over the years, just in terms of students and on the channel, where we are searching for the easiest questions, right? Where you can then guess at the end and you can get an incredible score by not answering all of the questions and using a certain guessing technique that we use. We have it on the channel if you haven't seen the guessing technique before, but I know that it works really well. Students will comment, all that kind of stuff. But again, the tricky thing, guys, in doing that on the math section versus the science section is we don't know any of the science. Okay, can everybody give me a thumbs up, guys? Thumbs up in the chat. Is it fair to say that for the most part, the majority of the science questions, I have no idea what's going on in those questions, right? Everybody feel that way too? Everybody kind of feel like along those lines of like, man, if the science section is, if it's really difficult, it's not like I know how to do it. I don't know the science anyway. Because of that, it allows us to move on so much easier because we don't have that, like, to the point, we don't have that pride, that ego, right, of that we have on the math section. Because on the math, we recognize questions a lot better, like, oh yeah, I think I can do that one. But it isn't until like halfway through, right? It's not until like halfway through that we realize, hey, I probably can't do this question, right? Halfway through completing it. Yeah, so Sylvia, again, learning from mistakes. I got to take all the ACT tests. Exactly, right, guys? Again, the practice will make perfect. And with the math section, the faster you can get away from the pride, right? The faster you can do that is just incredible, right? And guys, for those that are commenting, if you guys use the 3-pass method for science, you can apply it the same way for math. It's just more difficult on the math section because it's more difficult mentally to move on. Psychologically, it's harder to move on from math questions than it is from the science section because we don't, again, it's very easy for you and me to move on from the science section because generally speaking, we have no idea what's going on with the test, right? I mean, like, there's no way, I don't think I've ever met a single student, and this is now 2,500 students, not counting anybody that watches these videos and comments on these videos. Talking about 2,500 individual or classroom students that I've worked with on the ACT, I haven't seen one student ever know all 6 passages like they know what's going on because they're that good at science. So if you know that, it's so much easier than to move on right on science questions. You're like, why would I take the time anyway? I don't know what's going on, so let me go look for the data analysis questions. That's that 3-pass idea that we talk about. But you guys are exactly right. We gotta try to apply that same thing for the math section. And again, why I brought this up, guys, is that if you think about the math test, if you know the test is hard, right, and this goes to the point of like there were 3 to 5 questions in the first 30, right? Maybe you guys are experiencing this a little bit, those that are joining the stream now. If there were 3 to 5 questions in the first 30, yeah, well, difficult math tests are going to reflect that, right? So if you could get 47 and still get a 30 on the math section, well, that even gives you more reason to skip those 3 to 5 questions in the first 30. Right, because you're going to get that on the back end with the scale. Does that make sense, guys? Thumbs up if that makes sense. Any questions on that? The more practice tests you can take, but more importantly, the more scales. If you guys really want to know the secret to the ACT, it's understanding the formatting and how the test is scored, and then linking that to how you felt about the test. Like one of the methods, I think that's a little bit, for those that are willing to take more practice tests, and that's not everybody, but if you are, one of the things that could really help you is if you take a practice test, you immediately write down, similar to why we're doing this video, is because I know this is all very fresh in a lot of your minds, right? How you felt coming out of the test. Write that down when you take a practice test and then compare that to the score, right? Compare that to the scale of that particular test form. Can everybody give me a thumbs up if that makes sense? It's very obscure. But the reason that that's so critical is because then when you get to the real test, like this F05 test form, right, and you feel like, oh man, this test is hard. I'm feeling the same way I did when I took the B04 practice test, right? That type of difficulty. Oh man, well, it's probably going to be there for the scale, and that's going to prompt you on the math section to want to move on faster. Does that make sense, guys? So critical. Yeah. So Ved, that's exactly right. I love that. So anybody see Ved's comment? Part of the reason those real-time videos can be really helpful, guys, and why we started making those, and I love that, right? Is on all of those, when I try to speak out loud, I'm trying to talk to you guys about my inner thoughts. Yeah. So you want us to self-reflect and have a mental approach towards the test. I 100% do, because that will allow you guys So that will allow you to move on from questions when you get to the real thing, right? The guys, I mean this in the best and the worst way possible. Is I was a great test taker as a kid, and I wish I wasn't. I wish I would have had a better work ethic. But part of the reason I was a great test taker was because I was so lazy and such a bad high school student. My mom's a math teacher. I've said that in a lot of videos, so that helps certainly. And I was always a pretty good test taker. But one of the things that helped me so much was that realization of this testing and this formatting was like if I go in and I skip 6 questions, right? Like this was for if you're a lazy student and you wonder why sometimes being a lazy student is the worst trait. And I know that speaking. So if you're sitting there and you're one of the students that are just going through TikTok, right, scrolling video after video, trust me, that doesn't work out very well. I was in your shoes. Thank God TikTok, Netflix, all that stuff wasn't invented when I was your age, 10, 12 years ago, because there's no way I would have gotten anything done. Okay, but when you guys go through this, you have to think like I can get 6 questions wrong and still get a 34 on a difficult math test, right? And that's that self-reflection that I'm talking about, right? That's exactly that self-reflection I'm talking about. If you write that down right after you get done with a practice section or a full practice test, it will remind you, hey, I got to do this, right? I got to move on from this test. I got to move on the real thing because I didn't do it in practice. And lo and behold, the test form looked hard. It was hard. And, now my score reflected that. I felt tired. I felt all those things will play a huge role if you can write them down and think about that as you go. So thumbs up, guys, if that makes sense. Self-reflection is huge, right? And the ability to move on from questions when I was a kid, the laziness of that, unfortunately, was horrible in every other aspect of my life in terms of work ethic. On a test like this where you are severely benefited, that's weird, severely is, I guess maybe that's the right vocab word, right? You are significantly benefited from moving on from questions. You will be amazed at how much that helps. Because being lazy in that way helps you because, hey, I'm going to just skip. If it was a hard math test yesterday, the next time you take a test, if it's another hard math test and you feel that because you've taken practice tests, you've reflected on that, if you feel that way, you're like, oh man, I can skip 6 questions and still get a 34. I can skip, if math is, if you're really good at every other section but you're struggling with math, I can skip 21 questions and still get a 26. And at least then my math score, if I'm trying to get to a 30, right, my math score is not going to tank the overall score. Yeah. So Fear, you're 100% right. So that's a great point. I brought this up in the review. So guys, let me coffee played a role. Yeah, guys, try to simulate. So let me just comment on a couple of those. Coffee, definitely try to simulate. Write this stuff down. If you lost focus and you think about what you did before, right before the test, if it was different from what you do in school, think about when you've been the most focused in school, and maybe that's never been the case. That would have been for me, right? But if you did something different on test day than you would do when you wake up for school, which is generally about the same time of day, right? Then don't do that next time. That's another great idea for self-reflection. If we think about this test, guys, as a building block, right? Instead of thinking about it as like, oh my God, if I don't get this score, I don't get into Harvard and now my life is ruined. Instead, you come out of the test, you're like, okay, this went okay, this went not so great, this went awesome. And you write those things down and you think about those things, it's so much easier to overcome them or to mimic those things that went well on the next test. So Vic just brought up another great point on fire today. For those that are in the chat, saying whenever I skip a lot of questions on any test, hurts my confidence, and other questions get to the point where I'm skipping questions and you feel like you're skipping too much. Yes, that's the difficulty on the math section because can everybody agree, right? Yeah, take your practice test, guys. We always say this to our students. Take practice tests in the morning. Try to, if you really, really want to get better at the ACT, you should take your practice tests. Try to take them at 8 to 9 a.m. On Saturday or Sunday mornings. Because guess what? That's exactly when you'll be taking the real test. And it will help you so much because you'll get the feel for it. It'll just be another Saturday. You'll just drive to a location that's not your house or not where you live, right? And you'll just drive to another location, but everything else will stay relatively the same. Does that make sense? Just in terms of that's I think great. I think that's great advice. One of the things though about skipping questions that I want to mention is that we get that feeling a lot from students. Like if I skip too many questions on math, I feel like I'm getting out of a rhythm. There is a fine line. That's what makes the math test so much harder than the science test. not only are the questions and the concepts more difficult, not only are there more of those concepts, but it's difficult to move on from questions, and it's difficult not to move on too often. The math test is like an art. It's so much more difficult than the other three sections. Like we have students that are incredible math students that come through the programs or watch these videos, and they still do better on the other three sections than they do on math. Okay, and so again, there's a very fine line there for everybody as you guys go through this very fine line as it pertains to the math section. You got to be, you don't want to move on too quickly from questions. You want to give yourself an opportunity to answer them, but at the same time, you got to be kind of thinking in the back of your mind, if I don't know where I'm going with this after 30 seconds, then I'm in trouble, right? I need to move on in that case. So I always try to, just for the record, guys, if you see another hard math test, I always try to give myself 30 seconds to decide if I know how to do it. Some questions I know immediately that I don't know how to do it. But if I'm convinced that I can do it and I'm not anywhere, I haven't moved on, or I don't know where I'm going with the question after 30 seconds, right? Keep that kind of internal clock in your mind while you're taking practice tests. I try to move on. Okay, thumbs up, guys, if that makes sense. Yeah, so practice tests. If I take practice tests every day, will I see a huge improvement in my score? Largely depends. It's a great question. It's a question we get a lot from a lot of students. It all depends on how much work you're putting in after the practice test. So if you take a practice test every day and it's just to get a score, right, just to see something, terrible idea, because you're going to get burnt out really quickly. My recommendation for most students, some students can take a test every day, but you got to be so dedicated, and it's almost exclusively over the summer when that happens. You got to be so dedicated if you're going to take a test every day. If it's during the school year, what I recommend doing is taking one practice test a week, and then throughout the week going through it and try to analyze like what did I miss, right? Doing that self-reflection stuff and doing test corrections. Does that make sense, Ox? Is that cool? Thumbs up, guys, if that all makes sense. It's a lot of great questions today, guys, so I'm thrilled about that. A lot of great questions. Hopefully that these questions continue, because I know that they're going to apply for students. And again, if you guys are watching this at a later date, right, not during the live stream, not during the live discussion, you can always comment below the video with questions, concerns, anything like that. One of our teachers or tutors will respond, including me, at some point quickly. But at the very least, right, I think students will help you guys and help you answer questions, just kind of get the discussion going on all that. So hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully that makes sense. Guys, I apologize for the delay, the kind of the lagging and the streaming. I don't know what's going on today, but I think you guys can still hear me okay. So, and most of this stuff is pretty straightforward. But yeah, guys, again, there's a very fine line, I think, between the practice tests. I think the more practice tests you take, if they're properly analyzed and reflected on, I think that the more that you can do that, the better you're going to do. But you got to be committed. You got to find the right amounts of time. You got to find right. It can't just be kind of pieced together. You got to be really dedicated in that sense. Yeah, Ola, great. So guys, it's a couple things. So for those that took the computer-based test, whether you are in the U.S. or for all international students, okay, for all international students, if you're taking the computer-based test, the strategies we discuss, we actually have a. Let me just send this to you guys real quick. For those that taking a computer-based test, there are some strategies here. So guys, yeah, again, if you're an international student or you're taking the computer-based test, that video I just posted is for computer-based testing. Some of the strategies work better on the computer-based test. Namely, the 3-pass strategy for math and science works even better for the computer-based test because, and you'll see it in the video, because you can click, as you know, if you've taken a computer-based test before, the CBT, you can click on the question number, so you can skip and then you can go all the way back to question number 2. And there's some formatting things that help, right? So as you guys go through this, though, you got to make sure that you are. You guys got to make sure, right? As you go through this, you guys got to make sure that you're really really thoughtful about how you're approaching it. Okay, so again, the computer-based test is really good for math and science. Much more difficult on the reading section for the same reasons that were just mentioned there. If you can't underline, right, Ola? If you can't underline, it becomes a lot more difficult. Guys, without a doubt, the overwhelming. So again, sorry, just to real quick finish up on that computer base, make sure that you guys go through that video and you'll see how the strategies are better used on the math and science section of computer based, and how you can maybe try to overcome some of the challenges related to the reading section, because there are some more challenges with the computer based test compared to what we talk about during the lessons, during our live lessons. Okay. Yeah, guys, the biggest thing you guys can do on the reading section is to recognize how much better, how in your favor, let's say, the scale is related to the reading section. So sulfuric and milk there, right? As you guys go through this, so right, test 3, and I'll just bring this up. This is now the A10 tests. So if you guys are looking, this is I brought the A10 test in because I think A10 is like right in the middle of the road. Right, so the math section, for example, for A10 is a 30 to get 49 out of 60. I think it's pretty middle of the road on every section. 70 questions to get a 34. So if you're ever looking for like what the kind of the standard test is, this is the one that we use when we initially show students. The A10 test form, I think, is like right in the middle of the road on every section. So like kind of what you'd expect or what you'd hope the test would be, right? So no surprises, no challenges. That's the A10 test form. Okay, so if you go with that, going back to real quick the discussion before, and then we'll get into this reading stuff. If you go with that idea for the A10 test form, then if you take that and you recognize like what I mean by finding the easy questions, all that kind of stuff, and you reflect on this particular test, if you take it as a practice test, that can kind of be your benchmark. You'll remember back to being like, oh, here's the A10 test that was pretty middle of the road, and this is how I felt on that test. If a test in the future feels way more difficult than the A10 test, it kind of tells you, okay, this is probably leaning more towards that B04 test where the scale is going to be in my favor. So thumbs up, guys. That's really important. Actually, it lends itself really well for anybody that struggled with the reading section. Did anybody take the F05 test yesterday? Anybody take F05 yesterday and feel like the reading section was hard? So the majority of the feedback that we got back from students from yesterday, and then F06, I think, was today, was the Sunday test for October 2022. But I think the overwhelming majority felt like the math was really hard, and that there were a couple passages that were a little weird in the reading section. So I think reading was a little bit more difficult than it might typically feel. Here's what I'll say about reading, though. Understanding the format of the reading test is so critical, right? The idea of answering 25 questions. So look at this, guys, right? 25 questions. Most of us, because of school, again, this kind of breaks down to what I said like before about the students that do the best on testing, standardized multiple choice test taking, recognize this fact, right? Most of us think if I get 25 out of 40, right, I've gotten 25 correct answers, because this is how we think about it in school, and I have 15 incorrect. Right? How many of you guys think that way? How many of you guys, when you think about I got 25 out of 40, right? How many of you guys then think and think, okay, if I got 25 out of 40, then I got 15 out of 40 wrong, right? 15 out of 40 incorrect. Anybody think like that? Thumbs up, guys, either in the chat or below the video, or I think like that, whatever. Right? Something along those lines. Anybody have that where you're like, oh yeah, well I got 25 right, so I must have then gotten 25 wrong? Anybody have that feeling? Because I'll show you why it's critical to think differently than that, and this can also really help, especially if you've come out of a difficult reading section, right, or difficult math section. If you think, if that's your kind of your typical mindset, this is where we have to change, right? We will never think about those as incorrect anymore, right? Okay? If you go through this, guys, and you think about 25, right? 25 out of 40 correct, and you think instead of 15 incorrect, you think I skipped 15, right? I intentionally skipped 15 questions on reading because I wanted to guarantee accuracy here. And maybe that's because my reading speed wasn't where I want it to be yet, but I'm going to keep getting better at it. Whatever the reason is, in your practice, figure out how many questions in 35 minutes, which is how long the reading section is, figure out how many questions you can answer accurately, 100% accurately, right? So you should use a stopwatch. Okay, use a stopwatch to see how long it takes you first to get all 40 questions done with 100% accuracy, right? 40 questions, 100% accuracy. Okay, see how long that takes you, right? Because if it's theoretically a stopwatch that's ticking up, you could take as long as you want. And so the idea like, well, I can't be 100% accurate, that doesn't really hold any water, right? That doesn't really make sense if we're given as much time as we need. We can always go back and reread and understand it, right? So 100% accuracy using a stopwatch, or see how many questions you can get right. Let's say 25 out of 40 with 100% accuracy. Let's just say that that's the number. Figure out how many questions you can answer with 100% accuracy. Commit to that, because that's where the consistency comes in, right? And see how long it takes you, or how many questions you can answer in 35 minutes with 100% accuracy. Because if you do that, now all of a sudden the 25 correct, right? 25 correct is really just 25 skipped, right? Or 25 correct is correct, right? But the 15 incorrect that we think about in our minds are actually 15 skipped. Thumbs up, guys, if that makes sense, right? And then our guessing technique, for those that remember, right? If you remember this guessing technique, it can help you so much. You have AF, BG, right? CH, DJ, and there's an EF column for math only, but all the guessing stuff still works for math only, right? And you have E/K. What you're going to do is, if you've been accurate on 25 questions, and I'll use this example, we'll go through the answers, but if you have these and you are accurate on 25 questions, all you have to do is you look back next time and you look for the least used answer choice. Least used answer choice. Okay? Least used answer choice. You go back and you try to find what that is based on your bubble sheet. Now, if you've been accurate, this will work every time. So if you were 100% accurate on the 25 questions, because that's how many you felt like you could answer in that amount of time, all you're going to do is you're going to look back at your bubble sheet. It's way more obvious than you think it would be, right? Because, again, this is just an example, but let's say we have like these guys filled in, and you're going to have 25 different answers. You look back at your bubble sheet, you find the one that has been used the least. Which answer column of these guys, 1, 2, 3, 4, not letter, but column, has been used the least? You're going to go and you're going to guess that letter all the way down. Look what happens, right? You guys can already see that I was doing this earlier on a different stream, right? But for this A10 test, let's just say you get 25 questions right. Okay, so, and let's just use this as the example. It doesn't matter where the 25 appear. If you skip the last passage or you skip the first one, the same idea will happen. Thumbs up, guys, if that makes sense. Right? And now I go back and I look, okay, so which answer choice has been used the least? Well, there's a lot of C's, so I don't think it's going to be C and H at all, right? And lo and behold, look what happens. 1, 2, 3 C's, 4, 5, 6, 7 C's and H's, 8 C's and H's, right? So there's 8 C's and H's through the first 17 questions. Does everybody see that? Thumbs up, guys, if that makes sense. And then when we get to the end of the test, there aren't as many C's and H's. There are just 2, right? Because that's how the ACT, for whatever reason, that's how they distribute the answer choices. So if I go back and I look, it looks to me like maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It looks like D and J. Yeah, D and J are the least used. Watch this, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you are a great test taker, right, guys, thumbs up if that makes sense. If you get the first 25 questions right, you're 25 out of 40 correct. Okay, you're 25 out of 40 correct. And you look back to your bubble sheet. These will be bubbled in. You just have to look at which ones are filled in the least, right? J is here, J is here, and D is here, right? So up until question number 25, 3 out of 25 questions were D or J, right? 3 out of 5. But then when you come down here, right, for the distribution, it ends up being 9 out of 40 because so many are at the end of the test. Whereas C and H, and like I said before, even if you were to skip the first passage instead of skip the last one, then all of a sudden your C's and H's would be skewed, right? So it doesn't matter where you're skipping the questions in the test. It just matters that you're getting all the other 25 questions right. That's the key to that strategy. So again, you add 6 additional questions. If you get 25 out of 40 questions right and you find that least used answer choice on the A10 test, look what happens. Your 25, which was a 23, all of a sudden goes to 31 questions and you get a 29. I can't tell you how, for those that are struggling with the reading test, if you understand that formatting, right? If you commit to that idea for the formatting, you will do exceptionally, exceptionally well on this exam. I promise, on the reading section. And the beauty of it is that it doesn't really matter if passages are difficult or not difficult, because even if you have to, if a difficult passage comes around, maybe that means instead of getting 25 questions right, you get 23 questions right because you have to spend a little bit more time. But even if you were to answer 23, look what happens, right? Let's say on this test, I didn't get 25 right. Instead, I got 23 right because I had to rush. I had to slow down on the hard passage more than I thought I would. I still get 7 questions right. So now I'm at 23 out of 40, right? 23 out of 40. I add another D, right? Because I didn't have that one before. Now I get plus 7. And I got 23 questions done. Before guessing, that would be a 22, right? 23 out of 40. And then I guess 7 additional answer choices by using the guessing strategy, and I get a 28 on the reading section. If you do that, guys, you will be wildly consistent. You will be very, very consistent on any reading test you take. And that's where that self-reflection comes in, right? And again, I mentioned it earlier, but one of the comments about, trying to challenge yourself on the math test, realizing that is a huge step in the right direction. Yes, it's annoying probably to have to take another test. Yes, it's annoying to have to do more work related to this stuff. But at the same time, the realization that that's all that it takes is to not challenge yourself on those difficult questions or to stay consistent in terms of accuracy. That will make all the difference in the world as you guys keep moving forward. Is that cool, guys? Does that make sense for those that took the test yesterday? Any questions on that, guys? Thumbs up. Thumbs up if that all makes sense. Again, hopefully it does. Guys, if you've liked what you've seen so far, as always, if you want to give us a thumbs up, so if you want to hit subscribe, that's awesome. We also have a new membership program for all of our premium content, so if you guys want to check that out, you can as well. But again, at the very least, the premium membership gets you access to more videos. You can click the join button below this video, but it gets you access to all of our exclusive premium videos as well as a few live streams like this one that are only for our members, so it's members only, and you get to ask very specific questions. If you're interested in that, that's $3 a month. It also helps the channel. It supports the channel, and it helps us make more videos for future students. So again, if that's something you're interested in, please just look at that join button. If not, if that's something, I realize that not everybody can afford the $3 a month, that's fine. At least throw us a subscribe if you like what you're seeing so far. We always love to hear from new students. See, can you come on? Yeah, so guys, with those types of questions, those ones should I delete this, right? Should I, what should I do in this situation? Think about elimination. So English is all about elimination, right? When it comes to those, we talk about that in a couple videos, but always start by trying to eliminate first, right? Eliminate 2 answer choices. And take it one step at a time. It's the same as those 2-part questions that we discussed in science. But yeah, you got to make sure that you're really, really thoughtful about, taking your time and not losing sight of how to approach those questions and how to eliminate. Because otherwise, when you get to those questions, especially, after seeing 60 other grammar questions, at the end of the test, when you get to those, it can be really, really overwhelming. It can just feel very stressful, very tiring. But the idea of eliminating answer choices will just help you stay on track with the English section. So that's very, very important for those deletion. Should the author delete this sentence? Should the author add this sentence? Hopefully you guys are, if you've taken a practice test before, I'm sure you're familiar with those types of questions. Okay, guys, any other questions, any other thoughts, concerns about the test in general, test from yesterday? For those that are in the live chat, you guys are all the questions and comments are definitely very, very helpful for students. I know even if you're not commenting and asking questions, I'm sure a lot of these things are very, very helpful, and they'll be helpful for students that don't have a chance to watch the live discussion, but have questions after. So thanks for getting us on such a great start, guys that are commenting. I really appreciate it. I really make sure that obviously that the stream goes well. And once again, if any of you aren't able to watch the live discussion, or even if you do watch the live discussion, you come back and you want to further comment. If you comment below the video, I'm sure that one of our teachers or tutors will respond. But you'll get a lot of good discussion going with other students who also took the test and can kind of work through some of that stuff with you. So don't be afraid to do that going forward. We're going to try to do these, like I said, we're going to try to do more streams like this all the way through. Yeah, guys. So Sophia, you're exactly right. Yeah, that's what we say, right? So according to and based on, for the record on the science section, on every science section, even on difficult ones, the difficulty, and I would maybe write this down as a note to yourself, just so you guys know as you keep practicing. The difficulty on the science test is not when a test gets harder, like the B04 science section. It's not because there's a lack of those data analysis questions. So according to, based on, even on really hard science sections, there's not a lack of those, right? You guys saw that on the F05 test, right? There's still those same types of questions all the way through. When a test on the science section gets difficult, it's when those last 10, those like science knowledge or procedural questions, when those are really hard, then the test is really hard. But that shouldn't stop you from getting, if you get 30, right, 30 out of 40 of those data analysis questions and you're consistent and you're accurate, right, everybody thinks, well, I got a 30 out of 40, so that must mean that I got a 26. Not if you're a great test taker, right? Not if you're a great test taker. If you're a great test taker, and by the way, guys, I think I was just doing that for science. Whoops, on the answer key, I was just doing that for science for the reading section. I don't know what else. Whoops. Okay, so I'm reading. Here we go. Whatever. The strategy still works. Everything we just talked about, but I must be losing it, right? On science, right? Let's say you get through the all of the data representation questions, right? And then all of a sudden at the end, right? Here's the DJ thing again, right? But it could be any of the answer choices, so it's not always D and J, and it's not D and J on. But look what happens, right? There were 4. So what feels like a 30, what feels like a 26, plus 4 additional questions is actually a 31, right? And that's the thing. If you guys can get that part down, if you can understand that part and make feel good about that idea, you will do very, very well in the science section as well. What do you think the best way is to study for the math section? Well, first and foremost, the best way to study for math is to guarantee accuracy first. So, Ox, that's the first thing, is to guarantee accuracy. No matter how many questions that is. What I think is important for students is to see how many questions you can actually get right, to actually see the number. So you go through, you take a math test untimed, and you just see how many of these questions do I really know how to do. And if you can do that when the timing comes on, right, and you can get as many of those questions right as you can, not thinking about the score or thinking about like some goal number, you're just trying to answer as many of the questions as you can, that's the first step. That's the psychological battle that you have to kind of get over first and foremost with the math section. From there, it's really easy to improve because now, hey, I know I got 40 out of 60 questions right. Here are the 20 questions that I skipped that I didn't feel like I knew how to do. What are those concepts, right? What am I looking at here? If it's an averages question, right? Or if it's talking about graphs of functions, right? Then you know that, hey, you can just go back and study those. I will say, guys, that again, the Star U, if you go to Star U, you download an account, right? Star U to home screen, to lessons and practice problems on the home screen, to ACT at top. These are just the instructions, ACT math, right? So if you follow those instructions that I just wrote out for Star U, and if you haven't downloaded Star U yet, I strongly encourage you to do so. It's free to download, and a lot of the content is free. It's our platform. It's written by all of our teachers and tutors. Does it make sense, right, guys? For the math section, once you get to 40 out of 60, you have 20 questions left that you had to skip, right? And those 20 questions, hey, now I can go back and really think about what it is that I need to be practicing outside of it. And that's also the most efficient way. You're not then going over questions. You're not doing extra math sections just to do them, right? Instead, you're really thinking about like, okay, what do I need to do to get this particular question that I don't know how to do? How do I get that question right? Does that make sense? Let's see. There was one or two sections that were mainly wordy with considering or suppose. Yep, we're very wordy on science. People use their left data. Yep, track data. Use your index finger. I like that. Or pencil, right? Perfect. Yep, I think that's exactly right. So yeah, if you guys, some of that too. If you think about this, another really, mathematical way to improve your score is to the exact point. It doesn't seem like this would be a big deal, but it's a huge deal if you really break it down mathematically. Is the idea that if you're like keeping to this point of the comment there of like using your finger or using your pencil to track on the graph, like okay, it's the question says based on, so I'm going to put my pencil on based on figure 2, right? It says based on figure 2, so I'm going to put my pencil on figure 2, so that you're already there, right? You're thinking about it, and then you start reading the rest of the question. Well, if that saves you 5 seconds, right, plus 5 seconds by doing that when you weren't doing it before, and your goal is to answer 30 questions, right? 30 questions. Well, that's 150 seconds? That's 2.5 minutes that you just saved yourself, right? By just doing little things like that, by being a little bit more intense, right? In terms of like how you're looking at the graphs, how you're, those little strategies, you save yourself 2.5 minutes. That can be applied to probably 2 or 3 additional questions. Thumbs up, guys, if that makes sense. Like the little things, right? It's amazing how many of those little things make such a huge difference in terms of your analysis and like how you're, kind of how you're breaking this down. Is saving 5 seconds on each question by doing the little things right, by eliminating, by keeping, staying focused by putting your pencil on the figure, right, or putting your finger on the figure so that you're able to bounce back more quickly, right, like figure 2, that whole processing thing with your eyes. If that saves you 5 seconds on every question, you're going to be in incredible shape, right? That's 2.5 minutes. That's 3 extra questions. And guess what, guys? On the science section and on the reading section, kind of wherever, no matter where you are on the test, right? No matter what your score is, 3 questions is worth 3 points, right? On the reading section. Does that make sense? Or about reading or science section. Is that cool, guys? Thumbs up, guys, if that makes sense. Everybody good with that idea, that thought? Guys, any other questions? Yeah, thumbs up, guys, if that all makes sense. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I completely agree with that as well. Routine. The easiest way to go into this for everybody watching is to reflect on your what went well and what didn't go well, and then to change your routine based on that, right? So have a routine. Get started by saying like every day I'm gonna at this time this is when I'm gonna practice, right? Um, right. So make sure that you're thinking about it that way, and then don't be afraid to update that routine, right? Like oh this worked well, right? To the point that we were just talking and saying like if you're doing practice tests at night, that's not the best thing you could be doing for your routine, right? Like taking a practice section at night after school is not what it's going to be like on the real thing. I would much rather have you take a full test or 2 practice sections on Saturday morning at 8 a.m. because that's a better routine as it applies to the real test. All these things, for everyone that's watching, all of these things are the, it's the little things, the little steps that ultimately make a huge difference when it comes to the real test. The F05 test, as it relates to math and reading, right? Really critical that you're taking this in, right? You're thinking about it, you're breaking this down, and then that you're asking questions. Again, I think that the more questions you ask, like if you take advantage of the comments section below our videos, you'll see that a lot of people have probably the same questions that you do, and a lot of those questions are being answered, right, by either us or by another student. And if another student answers and we agree with that statement, we'll just say like great response, right? Or if we have something to add to that, we'll just respond always below the comments. But Again, you gotta be the ones that take the initiative and have the ambition to take advantage of that when it's available for you. And I promise it will make a huge difference. Okay, a huge difference. All right, guys. So again, I think that's probably good for the discussion. Just in terms of just getting some stuff out there, getting you guys thinking about this test, getting your thoughts down. Kind of as quickly as you can after the test is always a good thing, just to kind of decompress and debrief while it's still fresh in your mind. Like I said, if you guys ever have any questions or comments related to the test or related to the discussion, or have any things that you want answered as you start your next routine for your next test, don't be afraid to comment below. We're always looking for as many students as we can. Help us spread the word about the channel. We'll keep doing more videos. The more viewers, the more subscribers, all that kind of stuff that we get means that we can take our attention off of individual classroom and individual stuff and focus more on these type of streaming things. So please help us spread the word about these videos, and we'll keep making these daily streams as often as we can to keep you guys sharp, and we'll focus primarily on SAT, ACT stuff, but also get into the just some general college stuff as well. We just did a video on why MIT is now requiring the test again, which I think was a really good one. So we'll kind of keep it college focused, academically focused, and primarily on the SAT, ACT stuff, but we'll get on into some other helpful topics, I think, as well. So again, guys, thanks so much for all the students that commented and were participating in the live chat. Thank you. It always makes these a little bit more lively, the discussions a little bit more lively, and I know that it's helping other students as well who get to hear this and have the same experiences. So thank you to everybody that's commenting on that. I hope you guys, learn something from the live stream, and hopefully this helps you decompress a little bit and not feel like the world is ending. If you did come out of the test and felt a little bit shady, a little bit off, because it was just too hard or something went poorly. But yeah, keep trucking, right, guys? The test is behind that. October test is behind you now. There's nothing you can't think about that one too much. Think about what went well and what didn't go well, and then move on to the next thing and get your routine down. But you guys are doing great. We'll keep streaming. It'll either be right around this time in the afternoon. Most of our streams either start right around this time, same as today, even on weekdays, or in the morning. So like at 10 a.m. But those will be available. Those will be available for all students. Obviously right after. You just wouldn't be able to participate. But we're gonna try to make them, sometime between like 2 and 5 Pacific every day for the next until the December ACT and SAT test. So hopefully we can stick to that. We've done a pretty good job over the last week or so. And again, guys, help us spread the word. We want as many students participating as we can. And otherwise, you guys are great. Thanks for jumping on today, and we'll see you guys tomorrow for the next live stream. Any questions or comments, like I said, make sure that you comment those below the video. One of our teachers or tutors or another student will get back to you for sure. And again, I know you're not alone with a lot of those questions and comments, so definitely don't be afraid to step up and ask those questions. You guys are doing great. Again, we'll see you soon for the next stream. Hope you guys have a great rest of your weekend. And thanks, guys. Again, I'm Chase with Star Tutors, and we'll see you for the next live stream.